everybody, welcome back. This is the final video for this year's Kentucky Derby, Derby 143. This will go off as race 12 at Churchill Downs on Saturday. Back again with the usual crew, Scott Shapiro and John Doyle. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey. So yesterday's video I think was good flow and rhythm, so we're going to kind of take the same route with this video, sort of starting with plot and then go through morning line and then just kind of bring in any horses we think that are, you know, longer on the morning line that we think can hit the board, or maybe even a win contender. We'll see. So, you know, starting off with the plot, I guess from a good plot perspective, even though we have a red plot fit, and John will just have you confirm this, I think it has to do more with surface distance, but for the most part, these horses sort of line up along the diagonal, which is something we like to see in the plot. You know, when we were talking before I hit record, just about a lot of circles. Scott, you brought this up, a lot of circles in quadrant one, how that's not particularly normal. John, I know you did the historical video for the Derby, so why don't you kind of explain that based on what you've seen in the past?
Yeah, the first point, the point, Emily, about the plot fit being red, and you're right, that's just because we don't have any data for these horses going a mile and a quarter. Emily, if you could just flick over so people could see that, do a surface distance.
I'm one step ahead of you.
Okay. So all those horses kind of, you know, none of them will run a mile and a quarter, so, you know, basically, that's the reason. But you're right, you know, just these horses have been routing, you know, going 8, 9 furlong, and it's a good flow in terms of, you know, viability. You want to see horses lining up on that diagonal line, so they do. Yes, to your point about the clustering in quadrant one of circles, you know, that usually means contention. Now, the one thing I will point out, though, is that number 21 is going to probably go away, I would imagine. So, you know, that'll get a little bit freer up. But, you know, there is some circles in that quadrant one. And normally when we see that clustering, I'd be worried about a kind of a pace meltdown. However, look at the top. When you look at Optix RPM, you see the E. There's no true E horse in the race. If there were 1 or 2 E horses in this race, horses that need the lead or can't do anything, I'd be more concerned about this race melting down than I am. I think a lot of these horses, you know, can sit and can rate. They've proven that. And the Derby's changed, I think, in the last, I don't know, when they started with the qualifying races, maybe 5-6 years now. You don't get those horses that are one-turn horses and sprinters in here anymore who that's all they do, and they get kind of keyed up, especially on in a 20-horse field, and they all kind of run off and kind of create that, you know, that crazy pace and crazy contention in the Derby. So it's different these days. You know, a lot of these horses coming in who are really kind of more established routers, and, you know, they've been trained that way. They've been trained to kind of finish. So, you know, I'm anticipating kind of something similar to what we talked about in the, you know, in the Oaks, where I don't see, I mean, I see it, you know, there's always a potential for a pace, you know, craziness, especially if the 3 gets sent and somebody tries to chase them. But I think any kind of scenario, I think a lot of these horses in quadrant 1 could sit and you know, finish, or they're not going to be able to keep up with some of the others in there. It looks to me, early on, looks like the War Cry, Always Dreaming, looks like Fast and Accurate obviously going to send, and, you know, State of Honor are the early pace setters. And you know, out of those, you know, I'm just kind of looking at, you know, obviously Irish War Cry, who I didn't like as much, but I'm kind of liking more and more, especially based on the plot. You know, might be able to just kind of sit the best of those early pace runners. So
yeah, I would have a hard time not using this horse based on plot. Scott, did you kind of, I know because you asked this question and brought it up early, and really, you know, we kind of were able to have the early plots and just kind of pull out some horses. Did anything change for you looking at this final plot versus the preliminary?
I think the plot looks pretty similar. You know, no one really made a lot of it, but I thought that Fast and Accurate drawing towards the inside, like he did, may have kept the pace from being too chaotic. You know, outside of if a horse kind of runs like a, you know, pulls a Palace Malice or, you know, gets too keyed up, because I think that most of the horses outside of Fast and Accurate would be content to just sit right off this horse, whereas if he drew outside and sent, I think a lot of the insides, EPs or potential type speed horses would be concerned about getting drawn inside, getting dirt kicked in their face. So to me, the draw inside for Fast and Accurate was pretty key today. It was not discussed a lot. So that to me was the only thing that changed. It doesn't really show up on the plot, but when I think of the race shape, I think that might be something to think about.
That's a good point. And you got to kind of like the draw of Irish War Cry outside those horses, I think,
Gotta love it, I think. Knowing the horse and just, knowing the ideal trip, and I know that he kind of can be a head case of a sorts at times as well.
Let's kind of reference the plot as we go through, and we'll go through the horses on morning line. Again, we did a full in-depth 3-part series of this race, so this is kind of more just sort of review and if anything has changed. But we'll start off with the 4-1 morning line favorite. That's number 14, Classic Empire. And I know in the first video, this is a horse we talked about as, at least in my opinion, kind of a horse that's the most accomplished so far out of this field. Well, there is some reservations just as far as his pre-race antics, maybe a little bit of anxiety at the gate, but a horse based on what he's accomplished so far should be the likely favorite going into the race. You guys agree?
I think he is likely to be the favorite. I've also found it interesting that he seems to have gotten some of the least amount of press. Obviously, that has to do a little bit with his work regimen and the fact that Cassie wasn't trying to get a lot out of the horse this week. But he kind of is almost a forgotten horse this week in terms of if you're watching the works or reading a lot of the clockers on Twitter and just the buzz. It's been interesting to try to get a gauge for how he's doing. And I know you guys could speak to it more. You have more of an opinion on that. I know, Emily, you kind of have somewhat of an opinion, but I'm a little, it's odd. And looking at him on the plot, it's not a bad spot if I'm correct based on the Derby's past, but it's nothing that would make you really get excited to bet him if he's 4-1, right?
I agree with that, John. I know you were kind of a little interested in him, just is most likely to hit the board. Has anything kind of changed in the last week?
No, not really. It all depends on. There's no really knocks. He's a small square. You got some large circles there, kind of mucks it up. If he was those circles were kind of not there, he would look a lot better, right? So.
And one of them, the 21, won't be there, so I think that'll clear it out. And of course, this got asked on Twitter earlier. The plot will adjust for scratches. So in the morning, if the 21, 22 do not draw in, those horses will disappear from the plot. So keep that in mind.
And the plot gets recalculated.
Right.
So I really there's no knocks for me in this horse other than what we talked about the last time. If he, shows up and he's all wet and stuff, that's usually not a good indication for him. But, there's really little for me to knock. He's a win contender. There's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of, price and how you want to play it. But, to me, he looks solid. I can't knock that plot. I can't knock much about the horse.
All right, so we'll go to Always Dreaming, 5-1 on the morning line. He is a square in quadrant 3, which is something he's had in the past. So kind of interesting from a pace scenario. I know we talked about this before, whether he's going to be forwardly placed and be able to kind of move with the pack into the second turn. And on the plot, the contention on Snowflake is speed rating 27. Do you see this pace kind of being to his liking early with, I'll pull up the race shapes here, where he's kind of had those average to soft early races? Do you kind of see that in his favor for this race?
I don't. So it's a little bit different. Remember yesterday when we were talking about the Oaks and you're asking the same question about Paradise Woods, and I said that didn't bother me. It bothers me because just the way he's been working and just the kind of horse that he looks like. He looks a little bit headstrong in the mornings. And what I'm concerned is that he's not going to be able to relax in this field. It's a bulkier field that he's been facing. It's a different pace scenario. And, I'm concerned that he doesn't relax and he doesn't have that same kick. And so, yeah, he's a square in quadrant 3, but he likes to be near the front. And the concern is if he has to overexert himself early and he gets a lot of pressure to keep up, he's not going to have that same square kick that he's had in his previous races. That's just my assessment of it. Could turn out differently. And again, if you looked at previous derbies, you remember we saw American Pharaoh, but he basically took quadrants 1 and 2 his square. He dominated that, and he was kind of hovering over, and that was just kind of a different pace scenario. So that's my concern with him. And I know you guys have some more information probably about the way he's working and what your assessment is of him.
Well, I guess kind of the interesting thing from that opinion, and then Scott, I'll pass it over to you, is based on that, if your assessment on him is correct with that type of pace scenario and what he's shown so far, do you see him running out of the top 4?
Me?
I was going to ask John, but if you
yeah, go ahead, John.
Really.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Yes, it's a very good possibility.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
If he's not a freak and he's kind of surprises me, yeah, I think he's one of those horses where could be very marginal at shorter odds than some of these others in here. This is a horse I'll probably be taking a shot against in some fashion.
Cool. Scott, we'll pass it to you.
Yeah, part of, I agree with what John said. Obviously, we talked about it before. I think the fact this horse hasn't relaxed, I remember we go back to the Florida Derby, and he kind of, he broke from the inside, but Johnny V was really animate to get him off the rail as quickly as possible and get him into that perfect stalking trip. The pace was slower, but he's not going to be able to do that in this race, I don't think, with that post. I know, the buzz a little bit was that he got a good draw. I don't agree. I think that he's going to have, unless somehow they separate more than we expect with Fast and Accurate, and he can, get in that stalking spot. I don't think if it's bunched in that contention that he's going to sit a perfect trip outside. I think he's going to be in between runners, which is not ideal at all for the way he's been handling himself thus far at Churchill Downs. I think he's going to have to be a freak to run well in this race, and that could be. I mean, he's done very little wrong thus far, whether the race shape is different or not. But I'm with John, and I think I'm with you, Emily. I think this is a horse that I'm going to have to let beat me. I think there's too many negatives that to play him at a short price versus the others at his price. And yeah, I like the opportunity that's presented because I think if he isn't a freak, he could easily be out of the superfecta, which could really bust things open.
Okay, we'll move on to it's going down in order. Number 15, McCracken. We'll circle back to Irish Warcry. McCracken, I know, John, this is a horse you've been kind of coming around to, and I know that the works kind of, perked your interest. And I'll talk about the trip in the Bluegrass because, I guess was he the favorite that day, I would assume?
Yes,
yes. Yeah, he was the favorite that day. And the start wasn't that great, but I think it was kind of an interesting tactic. It was kind of an awkward break that they rode him closer to the pace, and I think that's kind of set him up for this race where he's kind of made a move and then a sustained run through the stretch that they might have just been training and working some more versatility. And since you and I discussed that, I know you've been kind of keen on that idea.
Yeah, I have, and just watching him work, it's obviously I love the way he's moving. I love the gallop outs and the speed he's shown, but more importantly, he really seems to be taking signals from the rider very well. If he sees another horse, I saw a couple of gallops. We saw another horse. He started getting going, and the rider just kind of signaled, "Oh boy," and he kind of listened. And it just seems to be getting along very well. And, they've been talking all week long about the track. He really loves the track. He's performed well over the track. So, yeah, I think, and just knowing that he's had 2 works, like, the week leading up to the Derby, that looks like they are trying to get some more speed. So he's positioned like on the border of quadrants 2 and 4 as a square. He's the kind of horse I think might be able to get a good mid-pack trip behind, some of those circles in quadrant 1. And so, yeah, I like him. I like his chances a lot more than, I think he's a win contender also. I like his chances a lot more than the Pletcher. So, yeah, I just think he's coming into this race really well. And I know a lot of people are high on him. Some people are worried about, I guess some of his numbers look a little bit light. But, like we talked before about projection, if a horse is going to win a race, he can improve up to, especially these 3-year-olds can improve, even more. But he could improve 7 or 8 points easily from his last race, which would put him in range.
Right, in those low hundreds on Optics figure.
Right.
My one thing, and I respect your opinion, so he's kind of an upgrade to me, but physically he looks a little bit on the smaller side, and that just kind of worries me from a physicality standpoint. But I'm definitely going to use him. A lot of it's like your opinion.
But I agree with you. But he looks athletic. He looks a little like street sense, right? So I don't know. He's sometimes you want an athletic horse more than some of these big rangy horses in the Derby too, in the Derby, because of the trouble situation, especially with his run style. He's going to have to overcome some stuff. Mm-hmm. So.
Scott, is he a use on top, exotic contender?
Well, yeah, the thing about McCracken to me that I've come around to over the week or so since we spoke last is I do think he's about as likely as anybody here to run his race. My concern is kind of what John said. Is that going to be good enough? Is there going to be 1 or 2 better based on the fact that I do think there's probably 1 or 2 faster? But I cannot dismiss him at this point. I'm probably going to pick him for about 4th in the race, but that doesn't mean I don't think he can win. And he'll be used on all my tickets with my key horse or 2. So he certainly won't bust me, and I respect him a lot. I respect the pattern that he has coming into the race. Obviously, Ian Wilkes learned from Carl Mavsker, who knows how to win this race, and there's few guys that are out there that have proven that they know how to prepare a horse better than Carl Mavsker to peak on the right day. So that's something I've been taking into account more and more as I've questioned some of the other horses. So yeah, I respect the horse, and there's definitely John and a few other handicappers that I have a lot of respect for that have bumped this horse up significantly of late and are definitely using him as one of their key horses. So I'm not ready to toss him by any respect.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, one of the things that we do with Optix and something we wanted to incorporate in the program is working towards those projections so that you're not always just stuck on what you see on paper as the horse's ceiling. So if we think that there's improvement and he's got a race that's faster, kind of back, there is that room there. Let's go to the number 17. That's Irish War Cry, again, a horse that we kind of all just looked at the plot and upgraded. Based on the last where he was wide and he had a biased trip, I don't know if he's necessarily going to get a bias, but, that potential for a good trip is there. He has a B+ in a grade 2. I guess one thing that just kind of stands out to me on the grid is he's kind of got that equal mix of red and green. He's kind of a Christmas horse. So yeah, he's a used for me, but I don't necessarily think I would make him a win bet. I wouldn't push him in that direction, but I could definitely see him being used on top.
Yeah, this is a horse that if you threw out his Fountain of Youth, which it's hard to accept the fact that he did anything other than that day than not fire. Based on the fact that he's, all of his other races are so solid that he's the 3-1 favorite in this race if you throw that race out, I think. And I think he's going to get the trip that has won the race, or closest to the trip that's won the race over the last 3 years, that outside stalking trip. Nyquist, a little bit different with Nyquist, but Farrow got it, Chrome pretty much got it, and it's a great trip for this racetrack and for this 1.25 mile distance. So he has all of that going for him, and I don't think the 1.25 miles is going to be an issue. So to me, he's the most likely horse to hit the board and a win contender.
Yeah, I think also too that's more of an ideal trip for him than it was in the Holy Bowl. I don't think he is a need the lead type, and I think that kind of letting some of those inside horses go and getting comfortable outside, sort of in the clear, is favorable. John, a must use on top.
Yeah, I think so. I can't argue with anything you're saying. I agree with both of you. The only thing I'll point out is that he did run on our numbers, the biggest prep number, 108, and the Holy Bull. Maybe he just bounced a little bit in the next race. And maybe now he's in a kind of new pattern now. He ran good. I mean, he did have, the track was in his favor, but I mean, he still had to work. He was 3 wide in that race, and he was able to rate, and looks like a trip that he might be able to get come Kentucky Derby Saturday. So yeah, I like him too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let me just click back over to the plot as we kind of go down in order, because I think the next we'll do the next 4 horses because these horses are interesting. Starting with the number 7 Gervin, who's been kind of so it almost seems like the forgotten horse this week, just kind of because maybe he's been at Keeneland, and then he's had those issues as far as having a quarter crack and a bar shoe, which is reportedly going to be off for the Derby. I tried to find a workout video. The only one I could find was kind of him running through the stretch, and not a very clear video, so hard for me to gauge off that. But 3 triple-digit Optix figures and a horse that I think is just going to be completely forgotten. I was kind of dismissing him sort of early in this week, thinking he'd be a shorter price and over bet, but now he's back into the mix for me. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, he's got the best plot, basically.
Yeah.
He's got a great plot. With him and Irish War Cry probably have the best plots. The one thing is the fact that he ran 300 buyers, and so maybe he peaked already. That's one thing. But he's a nice horse. But anytime that there's a foot issue, I'm concerned. You remember some of those trials and tribulations during the Big Brown when he lost to Belmont, right? I just think when the feet are not right, boy, I tell you, that makes a big difference. So that's why I'm probably, I'll probably use more as a kind of a spread, a marginal horse. Not completely toss him, but those feet issue make me really concerned.
It has me concerned, for sure. That part of it hasn't gone away at all. It's just more of the fact that I think that if there weren't the foot issues, this horse would be a lot shorter. And if he is fine, because the reporting on him has just been very strange. And I feel like if this horse wasn't right on, Rosie being the exercise rider and a former jockey, he wouldn't be here. If something could possibly go wrong.
The owners mostly dictate what's going to happen with the horse on big days like this. So
right.
Yeah.
So
I feel he's sound enough to run.
Yeah.
The other thing about the reporting is I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he hung up on. I mean, I don't think Sharp has made himself available. When all that was going on, he kind of handled it less than the different than the average trainer would have. We'll say. I'm sure he was upset over his top horse having this happen at the wrong time, if you will. So I'm not judging anyone, but the thing, like you said, Emily, it's kind of, the whole point of tossing horses in many ways is to, is when they're getting, going to get over bet, or when they're not, when they're going to not provide any value. Now that, everything fits with this horse outside of the fact that he has had these issues. So is he really, an ideal toss in this race, or is he worth including? I think you guys make a lot of sense in saying that he might be worth including still, underneath in spread tickets. That's where I'm at with him. It's hard to really be high on the horse with the way things have gone though over the past week or two.
Sure. So just outside of Gervin is a horse that I know both Scott, you and I have had to do some handicapping outside and submit our picks, that we both have kind of selected this horse as our pick. For me, this just, the more I've dug into this horse and just really looked at him, debuting at Saratoga, getting an improve there, And then 2 turns at Keeneland, finishing good behind, a good finish behind Guest Suite, which is a horse I was high on earlier in the year. And just kind of running some good races and just continuing to improve, and looks incredible in the morning. And I've gone back and I've watched some of his races, especially those early races at Oaklawn. And John, when I was talking to you about him and pointing out how Steve Asmussen's horses have this sort of look to them, you know, like Rachel Alexander had it, Untappable had it. I know these are fillies, but a lot of his horses kind of have that look. And hence had that same look early on in Oaklawn. And now he just looks bigger, stronger, more filled out. And I just think he's sitting on a top effort. And I just think he's going to be a great price. And where I kind of have some reservations on other horses. Really, my only reservation here would be the Plot. But I also know he's a horse that's been versatile in the past and has been able to sit closer. I know those were kind of soft paces earlier when he pressed at Churchill, but that just kind of gives me a little bit of confidence that he's not a one-run deep closer, and he definitely has a move. Scott, you wanna jump on that? Because I know you're a fan of this horse.
Yeah, it's interesting because 2 weeks ago I was not on this horse at all. Not that I was against him that per se, but the Sunland Derby key race thing I thought was a little bit overhyped because of Conquest Money, Mo Money's effort, which was admirable. But anyhow, this horse seems to be kind of, John spoke to it in the first series of videos, that the kind of now horse, in the sense that he seems to be doing his best at the right time, which has been a winning recipe for this race for some time, for the most part, unless you're speaking of horses that were just clearly the best from start, from the beginning of the campaign, like Chrome, Nyquist, and Pharaoh to an extent. But the track might be wet. He has a win over the Slop, which is encouraging. Not to say
maybe not if you watched it, but he does have a win over the Slop.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I didn't watch that race, not recently.
He drifts almost all the way out to the outer rail, and then comes back in. So if you were a bettor, it was dramatic. But that's worth a watch. You go back and watch.
Yeah, I watched the Guest Suite. Yeah, so I just think that, like you said, he's doing well. I like the rider. He's had some decent riders on him at Oaklawn and Sunland, but I really like the rider move to Giroux, who had success with a perfect. He gave Gunrunner a perfect ride last year. If that horse was good enough, he would have won the race. Not that he's going to get that trip, with this horse, but I think he understands this track. I think he understands that he can't be all the way in the back like he was in the Sunland Derby. And they went super quick in that race, so I don't expect him to be back there like some people. And I'm just really encouraged by what I see. I don't claim to be a genius in looking at him on the track visually, but I do know that this horse looks as good as anyone I've seen out there. I think he's got the same amount of, slight negatives as the top 4 that we talked about, even less than Always Dreaming, and I think his price will be 2.5 times greater, if not more than those. So I'm picking this horse on top, and hoping that Steve Asmussen can get himself his first Derby. I know he's more than due.
Yeah, I really can't add anything other than that. That Sunland Derby, we had as a pretty good number, I guess, and so did Briss. And, he did get flow in that race, but you could see really he made a very impressive sustained wide move, which, you need a sustained move in the Derby. It wasn't where like he just kind of picked horses up. He had to go around horses, and he started his rally very early. And he went around everybody, and he really finished up. It was really an impressive performance. He did get flow, but I like that performance. And, if the Derby heats up with a hot pace, he can make a sustained move into a hot pace, right? So that's a good thing. And if it's not that hot, maybe, like to your point, Emily, he can sit closer. So he's a contender. There's no doubt. Yeah.
In terms of the Brisnet number, he's got the highest last out Brisnet speed figure, for what it's worth, for those of you that use that number.
Yeah, I think he's tied on here, or maybe Gervin has it, maybe 102.
Right. Yeah, Classic Empire has the highest on ours.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 104, correct. All right, so let's get into. There's two more here at 15-1, and I'm sure some of the betting is gonna sort these guys out a little bit. Gunnevera was going to be your kind of key horse on the last video, Scott, a horse you were going to kind of use as just one, maybe not necessarily on top, but one you could kind of rely on to hit the board. Has a decent, if you, as far as like looking at the plot, him versus Hintz, you could definitely make a case from that perspective that he would get the kind of trip. Has your opinion changed, or you still kind of feel the same way? A good underneath key.
I still give him a good shot to complete the trifecta or the superfecta, but I backed off some on this horse. The more I looked at him, he's got 4 races, which isn't always a bad sign, but you guys mentioned it, and looking at it, he might have peaked in that fountain of youth. He might be moving in the wrong direction. He doesn't look to be the caliber. Now, he didn't look to be the caliber of horse in terms of visually in those Florida races either to me compared to the top couple. But he just doesn't look like a Derby winning horse to me when I look at him. I respect him. And then the last part is I just can't see the pace being to where it sets him up to beat 19 horses. He's going to need a perfect trip. He's going to come from way out of it, as we know. And it just seems to me that at least 1 or 2 are going to get the jump on him, and he's not going to be able to sustain that run. So he's going to be a use for me, but I'm not picking him in the top 4, and I did back off on him from a week ago for several reasons.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know. I didn't have a baseline on the horse, but some of the people that were looking at the horse in the morning did. I think, to me, in those gallops, he looked listless. He just didn't look like he had energy. So it could be what Scott's saying. Maybe he's his form is kind of going the wrong way. So that's my concern. And so,
Optics figures are declining, coming back in the Holy Bull, 104 to 196 in the Fountain of Youth, and then a 94 in the Florida Derby.
Yeah. So, Florida might have been his triple crown there.
Yeah, I also know he's kind of a leggy horse. He's kind of got an interesting build to him. He doesn't necessarily strike me as one the longer the better, even though he is making up lengths in the stretch. He kind of gives me the look though that he might handle a sloppy track. So as much as I don't want to think of exaggerator, as I'm kind of like very lukewarm on this horse. I'm still a little bit scarred, so yeah. He might be defensive if anything. One horse, the next one out there is Gormley. He is the number 19 horse. Hard to see some of these kind of awkward colors, but one I've mentioned on podcasts with the 18. With Ed DeRosa is this being a horse is just, it's not for me. I don't like the plot. I think the speed figures are soft. If he does take money, I mean, people like the sentimental type angles with Espinoza and John Sheriff's is one, a Derby, those type of things that maybe he's a horse that takes money just kind of based on that, but he's just not a use for me at all out of the top 4 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, John. 7
lanes slower than Paradise Woods, so there you go. So she probably would kill him in this race. So, I'm against this horse.
Yeah, and the thing about him is I can make the case that some of the other Southern California horses that were beaten, like John speaks to about the Paradise Woods, either didn't have things exactly their way that day or, different things occurred. This horse had the perfect trip that day, so I think that race is his upside. There's a couple things in terms of expecting to get a price. It kind of hurt me when I've been against this horse. I would made the statement that I would take both bets on this horse based on the win price about 3 days ago at 12-1. The outside post is gonna certainly hurt his chances, but also keep people from jumping in on him. I can't see how Victor Espinoza, who already is wide a lot of the time in his rides these days, I don't see how this horse saves any ground. I don't see this horse having enough speed to get a spot. It seems like a real problem to me that he drew the 18 we said? I can't,
Mhm.
yes, 18. Then he drew the 18 hole. And the one thing that I've seen a couple people mention is, and it may end up in him taking some more money, is if it's sloppy, he has that race in the Sham that to me was a real nice race, but it's just it's a mile. They were the only two horses in the field, him and American Anthem. American Anthem has not come back to do much. And I just think that angle might get overplayed if it is sloppy, since he has that win. So I've made it pretty clear, in all my avenues, that I am not a fan of this horse in this race. I think he probably was better at a 2-year-old. That before that front runner and that maiden win, he was a monster looking horse. I think a lot of these horses have caught up with him, and I'd be very, very surprised if he wins this race.
Yeah, off on notes, again, we have a couple red, Scott alluding to that perfect trip last time out. And then going back to the Sham, John did the note for this, and I agree, looking back on it, not sure about Triple Crown distances. And then, of course, we have shorter and lots of turf in his projections. I think we're kind of went through the 15, sort of switching back and forth. Getting into the 20-1 shots. I don't know if there's any on here you guys kind of feel as far as a win contender. I mean, since we're mentioning Gormley, I would probably like a head-to-head Battle of Midway over Gormley, leading Battle of Midway, but I still couldn't put him as a win candidate. A lot of these horses for me, they just look more underneath type uses. Anybody have a feeling on one of them? I know there was a little bit of interest last time as far as Sonneteer being a key underneath, as well as looking at Lee.
Right.
John, what are you kind of thinking there?
Yeah, those are my two, and I would include even IRAP in like a fourth or third slot too. I would not ignore that horse. I just think that horse, something about that horse, I just think it's got some comes out of that Sunderland race too, and that's a horse that really was up close to that fast pace. Got a little trouble on the turn, and still finished a decent fourth. So. The distance worries me, but you never know. Sometimes these horses that just are gamers hang around for a piece.
Yeah, and he definitely is. I mean, he only has that one win in the Bluegrass, but even still, he's consistently there. And some of those fields at California weren't terrible. Being a Grade 1 in the Los Al Futurity, not many horses on here have a B in a Grade 1, so there is kind of a little bit of sneaky class on him as well.
And just one other point, being in Quadrant 1 helps, and he's not that big of a circle in Quadrant 1, so.
Yes, so he is the number 9. A little bit below the par line. Again, I think this will be a lot clearer once that 21 drops out.
There's a horse I wanted to bring up that I'm giving a little bit of a shot to win this, that we haven't spoke of really hardly at all, and I'd like to get your guys' opinion after kind of making somewhat of a case, and that's Taprit.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad
I think this horse has shown races that are good enough, especially using John's theory that a win will kind of move them up at this point in their career. If you look back to the Tampa Bay Derby, I think that was one of the best prep races run. Granted, who was behind him, you can always make that argument, but I thought he finished very well. I think he had every right to regress off that Everett in the Bluegrass, especially considering there was absolutely no way he was remotely cranked, given the fact they didn't even need the points for the race. I think they just kind of ran a race, because they didn't want the long layoff, because Pletcher has not had success bringing horses right from the Tampa Bay Derby into the Kentucky Derby. So he is the horse out of all of those left that I'm going to be using him on my spread horizontal tickets, and I think he is amongst my top 5 for sure in terms of win chances in this race. What do you guys think, though?
I'm glad you brought up this horse, because we probably would have ended the recording and I would have been pissed that I didn't mention him, because I like him as far as the Todd Pletcher horse is the one I'm going to use the most. And just kind of going back to the Bluegrass, he has an improved projection out of that. Traffic, tactic, wide. That trip is just not ideal. So that race it is easily kind of, forgivable there, capable to move forward off that. Back at Gulfstream Park West, and I feel like the speed figures might be a little bit strong. Gulfstream Park West, just kind of watching Gulfstreams, but nonetheless, a triple-digit 100 speed figure, and again, that's also going 2 turns because that's Gulfstream Park West, Calder. That this horse has some ability. Liked him at Tampa, so yeah, I agree with you there. Good catch.
John, do you have an opinion on this horse?
Yeah, I watched him at Tampa because I was doing Tampa, and I really liked his Sam Davis, and I bet him. I wanted to bet him in the Tampa race, and I thought he got a pretty good trip in the Tampa race, and kind of like what I didn't like that he didn't seem to really go on with it. I thought he would just wipe him out in the stretch, and I really didn't like the way he galloped out. It was very abbreviated, so I think Emily said something about trainer technique. Sometimes they do that. I don't remember Emily,
yes,
but
that's
yes,
correct. Yeah, he does that a lot with his 3-year-olds, especially the chase.
So that'll make me feel a little bit better. But I'm a little concerned about the distance with this horse. That's my concern. But I can't. If you're using this horse at 20 to 30 to 1, I can't argue with that.
Yeah, he's kind of in that same sort of cluster of horses, 20, 16, 15, 10, 8, sort of sitting in that quadrant 2, 3 cluster. What about, one just let's...
One other thing about that horse, that was the horse I told you, the McCracken. I don't think McCracken was cranked either, but, I thought he ran better, almost better than McCracken in the same.
Me too.
Yeah. So, I just worried about after that Tampa Bay. I was like, because as the distances get longer, I was just a little concerned about that.
One horse I do want to ask about, just as far as kind of a race shape horse, and I don't really think that this horse is a win contender, but it's kind of interesting that he's in here. Is the number 4 Untrapped, and one thing I was kind of thinking about this horse is there a chance he could be a little bit more forwardly placed and maybe sort of part of the early pace? Did anybody else kind of see that? I know he's in quadrant 2, but he was. I don't know. I just sort of have a feeling, just kind of the way he's galloping, he might be a little bit closer than the mid-pack races he's kind of been running.
Yeah, that could be. I didn't get to see much of this horse at all.
Well, I know you went back and, he had that really wide trip last out. Figures are a little bit soft and grades are a little bit soft, so I can't push. I just kind of wonder.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, now I got him. Okay, yeah, so he did have that wide trip, and, and then he kind of got shut down a little bit early in the end of that race, but...
he's a little plotty to me, no?
Yeah, a little plotty and a little concerned about distance limitations.
Yeah, I think that's part of why that just kind of gives me, if they're going to try to win with this horse, they're going to have to put him into the race a little bit earlier, just, get him in position and hope for the best, so maybe he's another horse that just kind of adds to the pressure early on.
It looks like he tried to do that last time, Emily, with the blinkers.
Yeah.
I guess now the blinkers are coming off, so I don't know.
Yeah, but also the Mike Smith is coming off too, so we'll see.
I guess I wanted to real quickly speak to the two California horses that you briefly mentioned, Emily, that I give chances to fill in underneath. Mm-hmm. One of them is Sonneteer. I absolutely love this horse's chances to be the one that, a lot of people use the commanding curve analogy these days, since that, was the last horse to come and, pass a lot late at a big price. I think this horse is thriving. I think he has every right to pick up the pieces in this race, especially because he'll probably be too far back to make a real strong effort at the win end. So he's a horse that, and everything, he's been moving steadily forward in every race, even though he hasn't won. And I think he's doing as well as ever. And then you mentioned Battle of Midway. I didn't really get to talk about him too much in the last video because he is just slow on numbers. He just doesn't look like he fits. But something about this horse, I know that the barns always loved him. He was impressive in his maiden win. Granted, it was sprinting. before the San Vicente. I know he wasn't doing well before that race, and he ran to it. And I think that Flavian Prat fits this horse well. I think he's the kind of horse that could hang around. I think the distance shouldn't be an issue in my mind, and I think he could be one of those kind of horses that are up close or near the pace that just grinds along, especially if they don't go fast, like we think could be possible while it may be contentious. Because I don't see Pratt getting caught up in it. I think he'll sit right off of it with this horse, which could work to his benefit. It also could mean he finishes last because he never gets a call. You kind of maybe coming around to him a little bit, Emily, or not so much?
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I think that the same thing. I think he would have to move forward in a dramatic way to become a win contender. 91 last time out. But with that said, he was also grit and X-Flow. Those are very two positive keywords. So a B and a grade 1. There's things to like about this horse. He is as far as the plot goes, granted he is a circle, but he is above the par line. I don't mind that, because if he was a square, I mean, he'd be a must-use. Yeah, like I said, head-to-head matchups, I'd take him over Gormley in a heartbeat. I think same thing. He could definitely stick around and will be a decent price. I don't know about the quite 30 to 1, but somewhere in the 20s range.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that, I understand it based on numbers, or one number, or maybe two races, but there's no way that if you told me, a month and a half ago that IRAP is a better horse than Battle of Midway, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. And I still think that. Granted, IRAP has moved forward perhaps, but to me, this horse is a better horse. They're going to be similar, prices, I have a feeling. Doesn't mean he's going to beat IRAP. I just, the amount of buzz that IRAP's getting as an underneath horse at the price seems to be much greater than Battle of Midway. And a lot of that is well-deserved based on the Bluegrass and Sunland Derby effort. But I think he's more lightly raced, which may work in his benefit underneath, and that he won't be tired or a regression candidate.
Yeah. John, anybody else? Anybody else want to?
I like that analysis, and just to Scott's point, I'll take another look at that horse based on his feedback there. Quadrant 4, we said we're looking at Lee and Sonatiras. That's exactly where Commanding Curve was when he won. So they're pretty much almost the exact same spot. So again, Quadrant 4, very good underneath. Even be able to finish the exactas, the best exacta spot, the squares in Quadrant 4. So you want to give a look at those two horses are big prices, and we one of them maybe being a little bit off form. So those might be the ones. So yeah, and again, Quadrant 1 on Battle Midway. So that's the golden quadrant. So why not?
Yeah, interesting horse. Good catch on those, Scott. All right, well, nothing more to add. We'll kind of close up this video. I know we'll kind of, again, with OptixEQ and the weekend package, just finalize the Oak sheet that we're going to send out. John and I are going to work on the Kentucky Derby one following this video. All that stuff will be included. The weekend package, $50, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all tracks, including analysis. Anything else you guys want to add and push?
Just a note, you find it by going to the pricing plans page, and it's at the bottom of the pricing plans page, the selection for the special for the Kentucky Derby.
Excellent.
Yeah, I highly recommend the product. I used it to come up with my Spotlight selection, which is a full card analysis. I'm doing both days on Brisnet. It's great, and I gotta say, there's been a lot of talk of this crop being down. I mentioned it on Twitter, but to me, this is the kind of race why I'm into handicapping. It's a race where you go back and forth. There's so much to think about. It's not simple where there's 2 or 3 horses that stand out. To me, a Triple Crown winner is great, and I'd love to see a rivalry like we haven't seen in a while, like a Sunday Silence Easy Goer or a Captain Budget Freehouse Touch Gold Silver Charm, but if that's not, if you can't guarantee that's going to happen, I'd much rather have these competitive races that just require a lot of thinking and hope. If you're right, it'll be a day you remember kind of forever as a handicapper and a horse racing fan.
Great. All right, you guys. Well, thanks for being a part of these videos, and everybody, thank you so much for watching and providing feedback. It means a lot to us. Please continue to do that, and good luck this weekend.